let's move on to addition, subtraction, and estimation. Now, we've really done a lot of this already in previous grades. You see how it says 500 out of 1600 mastery points? That's because in previous grades, we already did some of this, so I'm not going to do again any of the topics that we mastered in previous grades. I just really like that Khan Academy has review. Rounding to the nearest 10 or 100. Oh man, we haven't talked about rounding yet. We have not talked about rounding yet. So let's talk about rounding. Now, on a number line, when I was a kid, I was taught that you round up if you're at 5 or higher and down if you're at less than 5. That was the way I was taught. And that's fine, and that works. But we're going to use sort of the idea of which one is it closer to figure that out. All right? So we're going to let's go. We want to round it to the nearest 10. And again, I really want to focus on language here. When we say the nearest 10, we literally mean the nearest 10. Look at the number line. Look at where A is at and think, where is the nearest multiple of 10? Like physically the closest. Well, that's 290, right? It's really close to 290. That is the nearest 10. What is the nearest 100? Well, I see 2 hundreds on this number line, 300 and 200. And obviously, clearly, easily to see, 300 is the nearest of those. So 290 to the nearest 10, 300 to the nearest 100. The reason that we say you round up on 5 is literally just because we had to make a choice, right? 5 is exactly halfway. It is exactly in the middle of the two tens. 15 is exactly in between 10 and 20. So if we're going to round to a 10, we have to make a choice. And at some point, mathematicians decided, apropos of nothing, there was no actual mathematical reason that we had to do this. We decided that we round up at the halfway point. That if you have a 5, if you are exactly halfway, you round up. That is just a thing that we made up. This point, we want to drag it to 74. So 71, 2, 3, 74. Rounded to the nearest 10, that would be 70. 70 is the nearest 10 to that point. Which number highlights all the whole numbers? I love this so much. I cannot overstate how much I love the kinds of problems that Khan Academy comes up with. Look at this. Which number highlights all of the whole numbers that round to 90? This one, A, looks close, right? It goes from 90 to 95, but 95 does not round down, so this one is wrong. The correct answer is the one that goes from 85, right? Because 85 rounds up to 90, all the way up to 94. And if you can get a third grader to understand that all of the numbers that round to 90, all the whole numbers, let's forget about decimals and fractions and nonsense. We'll deal with them later. But when you're just talking about whole numbers, if a student can say that from 85 to 94 is all of the whole numbers that will round to 90, that is a huge leap forward, and that should be celebrated. What is A rounded to the nearest 10? That looks like 450 to me. But since it is above 450, the closest 100 is actually 500. Excellent. Which point shows 116 on the number line? Well, that would be A, right? It has to be because everything else is above 150. So I don't know why it asked us that, but we're going to do it anyway. And what is it rounded to the nearest hundred? Once again, there's 200, there's 100. A is clearly, obviously, visually nearest to the 100 rather than the 200. If we're going to round to 500 to the nearest 100, that would go from 450 to 549. Again, once you hit 550, you start rounding up to 600. And if you get less than 450, you're going to round down to 400. And then A, what is it rounded to the nearest 10? Looks like 640 to me. Notice how it doesn't actually ask us what A is. It doesn't tell us what A is. Who cares what A is? We're not interested in the value of A. We're interested in rounding A to the nearest 10 to the nearest 100. And that would be 600. And that is round to the nearest 10 or 100 on the number line. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to do it without the number line. That is called scaffolding. Scaffolding is the sort of in-between steps that teachers work into lessons so that students can understand them better. Eventually, you take out those in-between steps. You take out those hints and just let them round on their own. So let's go ahead and round to the nearest 10 or 100. 92 degrees Celsius to the nearest 10 is 90. And this time it doesn't give us a visual, right? It's not showing us physically that 92 is closer to 90 than 100. It is assuming that we know that 92 is in between 90 and 100. And of those two, it's closer to 90 than 100, so that's where we're rounding to. Which of the following numbers round to 30 if we're rounding to the nearest 10? Well, 31 rounds down to 30. 25 rounds up to 30, and both of those are correct. 35 is not correct because it rounds up to 40. 89 rounded to the nearest 10 is 90. 89 to the nearest 100 is 100. It is closer to 100 than it is to 0 hundreds. And that's that. Lisa's building has 461 pieces. To the nearest 100, that would be 500 pieces.